There is something that enters every room before you do. It speaks before you say your first word. It changes the way people respond to you, the opportunities you notice, and even the thoughts that quietly grow inside your own mind. Most people never see it, yet they spend their entire lives being guided by it. Have you ever wondered why two people can face the exact same situation and walk away with completely different futures? One sees possibility, the other sees another reason to give up. One attracts meaningful relationships, the other keeps repeating the same painful patterns. One seems calm, even in the middle of chaos, while the other feels exhausted by problems that never seem to end. At first, it looks like luck, or talent, or coincidence. But what if none of those things explain the difference? What if the invisible force shaping your life has always been coming from within you? Not because the world is unfair, not because life chose favorites, but because every day, without realizing it, you are teaching your mind, your body, and even the people around you how to respond to your presence. Most of us believe our lives are changed by the events that happen to us. We wait for better circumstances, a better job, a better relationship, more money, more confidence, more certainty. Always believing that once life changes, we will finally feel different. But reality often works in the opposite direction. You begin to feel different first, and then, little by little, your world begins to respond. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is not about forcing positive thoughts. And it is certainly not about ignoring pain. Pain deserves to be acknowledged. Fear deserves to be understood. Grief deserves to be honored. But there comes a moment when you must ask yourself a question that changes everything. What kind of energy am I carrying through my life? Not the energy you show on social media. Not the smile you force around strangers. Not the version of yourself that tries to convince everyone that everything is fine. The real one. The silent atmosphere. That follows you wherever you go. Because whether you notice it or not, people feel it. Your body feels it. Your decisions reflect it. And over time, your entire life begins to mirror it. Maybe you've experienced this before. You wake up already exhausted. Nothing terrible has happened, yet everything feels heavier. Small inconveniences become unbearable. Simple conversations become arguments. Tiny disappointments become proof that life is working against you. Then there are other days. Nothing extraordinary happens. The same job, the same house, the same people. Yet somehow, everything feels lighter. Ideas appear more easily. You smile without forcing it. Solutions seem obvious. Even challenges lose part of their power. What changed? Was it the world? Or was it something inside you, Tian, that quietly transformed the way you experienced everything else? That invisible shift is far more powerful than most people imagine. Because your inner state doesn't simply react to reality. It participates in creating the reality you experience. Tonight, we're going to explore that invisible force together. Not through superstition, not through empty promises, but through something much deeper. We'll explore why your emotional patterns become your life patterns, why the energy you repeatedly live in becomes the future you unconsciously build, and why changing your life may begin with changing something you cannot see. Because the greatest prison isn't the world around you, it's the invisible atmosphere you've unknowingly carried within yourself for years. And the moment you learn to transform it, everything else can begin to change. Chapter 1. The invisible atmosphere you carry every day. Before you can change your life, you have to understand something most people never question. Every human being carries an atmosphere. Not something you can see, not something you can touch, but something everyone around you can feel. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed that something was wrong? No one had said a word, no one explained anything, yet somehow you knew. The air felt heavy. Conversations felt forced. Even silence seemed uncomfortable. Now think about the opposite. Have you ever met someone whose presence immediately made you feel calm? Someone who didn't speak loudly, didn't try to impress anyone, didn't demand attention, yet simply being near them made your breathing slow down, made your shoulders relax, made the world feel a little less complicated. What were you feeling? Most people would call it intuition. Some would call it energy. Others might simply say, it's a feeling. The name doesn't matter, the experience does. Because whether you realize it or not, your nervous system is constantly reading the emotional state of everyone around you. Come. Long before your conscious mind reaches a conclusion, your body has already decided whether a person feels safe or dangerous, whether they carry peace or tension, whether they bring clarity or confusion. This is why some conversations leave you inspired, and others leave you completely exhausted, not because of the words, but because words carry the emotional state of the person speaking them. And here's the part most people never notice. You are doing the exact same thing. Every single day, without intending to, you are teaching the world how to experience you. Not through your appearance, not through your achievements, not through your possessions, but through the emotional atmosphere you consistently bring into every interaction. Imagine carrying a glass filled to the very top. Every movement causes a little to spill. If the glass is filled with fear, fear spills into every conversation. If it is filled with resentment, resentment quietly appears in your tone. If it is filled with anxiety, people begin feeling anxious without understanding why. Because what overflows from you is rarely your words. It is your emotional state. And this creates something fascinating. Many people believe they are reacting to life, but often, life is reacting to them. Think about someone who expects rejection. Before entering a room, their body becomes tense. Their eyes avoid contact. Their voice loses confidence. Their mind searches for signs that they don't belong. Now imagine someone else. The same room, the same people, the same circumstances. Yet they walk differently, they breathe differently, they expect connection instead of rejection. The room itself hasn't changed, but their experience of it changes completely. This is why two people can live inside the same reality, while inhabiting entirely different worlds. Your inner atmosphere becomes the lens through which everything is interpreted. A delayed message becomes proof that someone doesn't care. A small mistake becomes evidence that you're a failure. A challenge becomes confirmation that life is against you. Not because those conclusions are true, but because your emotional state is quietly translating reality for you. The frightening part is that this process becomes invisible. After repeating the same emotional patterns for years, they no longer feel like emotions. They feel like facts. You stop saying, I feel afraid. Instead, you begin saying, the world is dangerous. You stop saying, I feel unworthy. Instead, you believe, people always leave. You stop saying, I've been disappointed. Instead, you convince yourself, nothing good ever happens to me. Can you see what happened? Your temporary emotional state became your permanent explanation for reality. And once that happens, your life begins moving in circles. Not because you're cursed, not because you're unlucky, but because every new experience is filtered through an old emotional atmosphere. The mind loves familiarity, even when familiarity hurts, because certainty feels safer than change. This is why people sometimes hold on to suffering without realizing it. Not because they enjoy pain, but because pain has become predictable. And the unknown always feels more frightening than the familiar. This is the invisible prison. You believe you're protecting yourself, when in reality, you're protecting the version of yourself that first learned to be afraid. The child who learned that love could disappear. The teenager who learned that rejection hurts. The adult who learned to expect disappointment before expecting possibility. Over time, those experiences stopped being memories. They became identity. And identity is one of the strongest forces shaping human behavior. Because people rarely act according to what they want. They act according to who they believe they are. If you believe you're always overlooked, you'll unknowingly hide your own voice. If you believe you're not enough, you'll reject opportunities before they have the chance to reject you. If you believe happiness never lasts, you'll find reasons to sabotage it the moment it arrives. Not consciously, quietly, automatically, almost invisibly, which raises an uncomfortable question. If your inner atmosphere has been shaping your choices all along, who created that atmosphere? Was it really you? Or was it built? One painful experience at a time, until you accepted it as the only way to exist? Because if it was learned, then something extraordinary becomes possible. It can also be unlearned, and that is where real transformation begins. Chapter 2. The life you repeat is built by the feelings you repeat. Most people believe their lives are shaped by the biggest moments: graduation, marriage, loss, success, failure. But those moments rarely determine the direction of a life. What truly shapes a person is what happens between those moments. The thoughts that return every morning, the emotions that quietly become familiar, the conversations they keep having with themselves again and again and again. Imagine walking through the same forest every single day. At first, there is no path, only wild grass. But after enough repetitions, the ground begins to change. The grass disappears. The soil becomes exposed. Eventually, there is a trail, then a road. Then it becomes the only direction you know. Your mind works the same way. Every repeated emotion creates another step along an invisible path. Every repeated fear makes fear easier to return to. Every repeated resentment makes resentment feel natural. Every repeated disappointment teaches your mind that disappointment is simply how life works. One day, you stop questioning it. You simply call it your personality. I've always been this way. I've never been confident. I've always overthink everything. I'm just an anxious person. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. Those sentences may feel true, but they are often nothing more than repeated emotional habits. Habits that became identity. Identity that became destiny. Not because destiny is written somewhere, but because every decision begins to follow the person you believe yourself to be. If you expect rejection, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you miss opportunities. When opportunities disappear, you tell yourself, I knew it. The belief becomes stronger, and the cycle repeats. This is how invisible prisons are built, not with chains, but with repetition. There is something fascinating about the human brain. It prefers what is familiar over what is beneficial. Even suffering can become familiar. Think about that for a moment. Some people remain inside relationships that slowly destroy them, not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering has become predictable. Predictable feels safe. The unknown doesn't. The same thing happens around with emotional states. If you've spent years living with worry, peace may actually feel uncomfortable. If you've spent years expecting conflict. Healthy relationships may seem boring if you've spent years criticizing yourself. Self-compassion may feel undeserved. This is why real transformation may often feel strange before it feels right. Because your nervous system isn't asking, is this better? It's asking, is this familiar? And those are two very different questions. Most people wait until they feel motivated to change. But motivation is unreliable. It comes. It goes. Identity remains. And identity is built quietly through what you repeatedly practice. Every time you choose courage, even while feeling afraid, you weaken the old path. Every time you pause, instead of reacting, you create a new one. Every time you forgive yourself, instead of attacking yourself, something invisible begins to shift. Not all at once, but steadily. Like water, wearing away stone, small choices, made consistently, change the architecture of your inner world. This is why lasting transformation is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, almost invisible. One day, you notice that something which used to trigger you no longer has the same power. A comment that once ruined your week barely affects your afternoon. A fear that controlled your decisions becomes little more than a passing thought. The circumstances may not have changed, but you have. And because you have changed, you begin noticing opportunities that were always there. People often say, "The world finally opened its doors to me." But perhaps the doors were never closed. Perhaps the person walking toward them had changed. This is the quiet miracle few people recognize. Your external life rarely changes first. Your perception changes. Your presence changes. Your decisions change. And eventually, your reality has no choice but to follow. There is no magic in this, only cause and consequence. Because every thought you repeatedly believe becomes an emotion. Every emotion becomes a state. Every state guides your choices. And your choices slowly become the story of your life. So before asking, how do I change my future? Perhaps there is a better question. What emotional story have I been rehearsing every single day? Because whatever story you continue rehearsing will eventually become the life you live. And the most beautiful part is this: a story can always be rewritten. Chapter 3. Why your mind protects the life that hurts you. There is a question that almost nobody asks. If suffering hurts so much, why do we keep returning to it? Why do intelligent people repeat the same relationships, the same mistakes, the same disappointments, the same fears? Again, and again, and again. It almost feels as if some invisible force keeps pulling them back to a life they desperately want to escape. For a long time, people believed this happened because they lacked discipline, or because they weren't trying hard enough. But the truth is much more complicated. Your mind was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. And survival doesn't always choose freedom. It chooses familiarity. Imagine a child who grows up in a home where love always comes with criticism. Every compliment is followed by judgment. Every achievement is never enough. Every mistake feels dangerous. That child doesn't understand psychology. The child doesn't stop to analyze emotional patterns. The child adapts because adaptation is how human beings survive. Little by little, their nervous system learns something. Love means tension. Affection comes with fear. Acceptance must be earned. Years pass. The child becomes an adult. The house changes. The city changes. The people change. But the emotional blueprint remains exactly the same. Now, without realizing it, that adult feels strangely comfortable around emotionally unavailable people, not because they enjoy suffering, because suffering feels familiar. Healthy love feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel dangerous. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of being human. Sometimes, the life you want feels more frightening than the life you're trying to escape. Not because it is worse, but because it is unknown. Think about someone who has lived in scarcity their entire life. When an opportunity finally appears, what happens? Many people assume they will embrace it immediately, but that isn't always true. Some hesitate, some procrastinate, some convince themselves they aren't ready. Some sabotage the opportunity completely. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it feels safe. Because success doesn't only change circumstances, it changes identity. And identity is one of the things the mind protects most fiercely. Every human being develops an internal picture of who they believe they are, not who they truly are, who they have learned to be. Maybe I'm always the responsible one. I'm the person who gets abandoned. I'm the one who struggles. I'm invisible. I'm never enough. At first, these are only thoughts. Then, they become stories. Eventually, they become reality. Not because they are objectively true, but because every decision starts protecting them. If your identity says, "I don't deserve happiness," you will unconsciously reject what could finally heal you. Not because you want pain, but because pain matches the person you believe yourself to be. This happens so quietly now that most people never notice it. They believe life is happening to them, when in reality, they are unconsciously rebuilding the emotional world their mind already understands. This is why change can feel exhausting. Not because transformation is impossible, but because transformation asks you to question the person you've been protecting for years. There is another reason your mind resists change. Predictability creates the illusion of control. Even painful certainty can feel safer than hopeful uncertainty. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind you is a road you've walked your entire life. You know every stone, every turn, every disappointment. Ahead of you is a bridge. You cannot see where it ends. You only know that crossing it means leaving behind the person you've always been. Most people turn around, not because the bridge is weak, because the past still feels safer than possibility. This is why real transformation is never only emotional. It is an act of profound courage, because every step forward feels like the death of an identity that once protected you. And identities rarely disappear without resistance. They whisper, "Stay where it's safe. Don't dream too big. People like you don't succeed. You'll only get hurt again. You've tried before. Nothing ever changes." Listen carefully. Those thoughts are not prophecies. They are echoes of experiences that your mind mistakes for permanent truth. The past is speaking, not reality. And here's something extraordinary. The moment you recognize those voices, they begin losing their power. Because awareness creates distance, and distance creates freedom. Instead of saying, "I am afraid," you begin saying, "I notice fear." Instead of saying, "I am broken," you begin saying, "I learned to survive this way." That tiny shift changes everything. Because now, fear is no longer your identity. It is simply an experience. An experience that can end. Every meaningful transformation begins exactly here. Not by fighting yourself, not by pretending you have no wounds, but by realizing that the version of you who built those defenses was only trying to survive. Honor that version. Thank that version. Then gently leave that version behind, because survival was never meant to become your permanent home. You were meant to live, and living always begins the moment you stop protecting the life that no longer protects you. Chapter 4. The invisible shift that changes everything. There comes a moment in every person's life when they begin asking a different question, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What inside me keeps recreating this experience?" That question changes everything. Because for the first time, your attention stops chasing the outside world and begins exploring the only place where lasting transformation can begin: within. Most people spend years trying to rearrange their circumstances. A new relationship, a new city, a different career, more money, more recognition, believing that somewhere outside themselves there is a missing piece. And for a while, those changes feel exciting. A new beginning, a fresh start. Hope returns. Until, slowly, almost invisibly, the old emotions return. The same insecurity, the same fear, the same loneliness. Only wearing different clothes, different faces, different places, different stories, but the same emotional pattern. This is why some people can change everything around them, yet still feel exactly the same inside. Because changing your environment without changing your inner atmosphere is like moving into a new house while carrying all the old furniture, all the old dust, all the old darkness with you. Eventually, the new house begins to feel exactly like the old one. Not because the house changed, because the person living inside it never did. Real transformation doesn't begin when your circumstances improve. It begins when your perception changes. Think about a window covered with years of dust. The sunlight outside never disappeared. The landscape never stopped existing. The beauty was always there. The only thing preventing you from seeing it was the layer covering the glass. Many people spend their lives trying to change the world, when what truly needs cleaning is the window through which they see it. This doesn't mean every problem exists only in your mind. Pain is real, loss is real, injustice is real. But your interpretation determines whether those experiences become your prison or your teacher. Some people leave suffering with a deeper heart. Others leave with deeper bitterness. The event was identical. The meaning was not. And meaning is one of the greatest creative forces a human being possesses. Nothing has meaning by itself. Meaning is something we quietly give to every experience. A failure can become proof that you're incapable, or it can become evidence that you're growing. A rejection can become confirmation that you're unworthy, or it can become the moment that redirects your life towards someone or something that truly belongs to you. Life doesn't always choose the meaning. You do, even if you don't realize it. This is where the invisible shift begins. Instead of asking, "What happened?" you begin asking, "What story did I create about what happened?" Those are very different questions, because facts last a moment. Stories can last a lifetime. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, you notice its weight. Your shoulders hurt. Your body aches. But after years, something strange happens. You stop noticing the backpack. It becomes part of you, until one day, someone asks, "Why are you carrying all of that?" And you answer, "What backpack?" This is exactly what happens with emotional burdens. Old guilt, old shame, old disappointments, old beliefs. They become so familiar that you no longer experience them as something you're carrying. You experience them as who you are. And that illusion keeps you trapped, because no one tried to put down what they believe is part of themselves. Transformation begins the moment you realize that your pain is something you experienced, not something you are. Read that again, inside your own mind. Your pain is something you experienced. It is not your identity. The fear you've carried for years is not your personality. The shame is not your name. The disappointment is not your destiny. They are experiences that shaped you. But they do not define you. And once you truly understand this, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting yourself, because you finally understand that healing isn't becoming someone else. It is remembering who you were before fear convinced you that you had to become someone smaller. There is a quieter version of you beneath all the noise, a calmer version, a wiser version, a version that doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need everyone's approval, doesn't measure its worth through achievements or comparisons or constant validation. That version has always been there, waiting, not to be created, but to be uncovered. Little by little, every conscious choice removes another layer, another old belief, another unnecessary fear, another story that no longer belongs to you. Until one morning, you wake up and something feels different. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because, for the first time, your inner world is no longer working against you. And when that happens, you begin moving through life with a quiet confidence that cannot be borrowed, cannot be bought, and cannot be taken away, because it no longer depends on what happens around you. It comes from who you have finally become within. Chapter 5. The daily choices that quietly transform your reality. If everything you've heard so far is true, then another question naturally appears. How do you actually change the atmosphere you carry? Not for a few hours, not after watching an inspiring video, but in a way that quietly transforms the person you become. The answer is far simpler than most people expect, and perhaps that is why so many people overlook it. Because transformation is rarely built through extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary moments, repeated differently. Every single day, life offers you hundreds of invisible choices. Most of them seem insignificant. Whether you pause before reacting, whether you continue a familiar complaint, whether you feed another fearful thought, whether you choose to remain present instead of escaping. None of these choices look life-changing, but together they become the architecture of your future. Imagine placing a single drop of water onto a stone. Nothing happens. Another drop. Still nothing. 100 drops. The stone remains the same. But after thousands, after millions, the impossible begins to happen. The stone changes shape. Not because one drop was powerful, but because consistency is stronger than intensity. Your inner life changes exactly the same way. Many people believe they need one incredible breakthrough, one perfect morning, one powerful meditation, one unforgettable experience. Those moments can inspire you, but they cannot replace daily practice. Because the person you become is not created by what you do occasionally. It is created by what you repeat when nobody is watching. Every morning, before the world asks anything of you, there is a brief moment when your mind is still quiet. A moment before the notifications, before the conversations, before the responsibilities. That moment is more valuable than most people realize. Because the first emotion you deliberately cultivate often becomes the emotional foundation for everything that follows. Imagine beginning your day without immediately reaching for distraction. No phone, no endless scrolling, no rushing to fill every second with noise. Instead, you sit quietly, just for a few moments. You notice your breathing, not to escape life, but to arrive inside it. You notice how your body feels, without judging it, without trying to change it. Simply noticing. Because awareness always comes before change. You cannot transform what you refuse to see. Then, instead of asking, "What problems do I have today?" you ask something different. "What kind of person do I want to be today?" Notice the difference. One question focuses on circumstances. The other focuses on identity. And identity always leads behavior. Maybe today, you choose patience, not because life will suddenly become easier, but because you refuse to let frustration decide who you become. Maybe today, you choose courage, not because fear disappeared, but because fear no longer gets to make your decisions. Maybe today, you choose kindness, especially toward yourself, because you finally understand that the voice living inside your own mind will become the atmosphere you carry into the world. Most people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. You'll fail. You'll never change. You always ruin everything. You should have done better. Imagine hearing those words every single day for years. Wouldn't they eventually become your reality, not because they are true, but because your mind believes what it hears most often. This is why the conversations you have with yourself matter so deeply. Every sentence plants something: hope or fear, trust or doubt, expansion or limitation. Little by little, those invisible seeds grow into visible choices, and visible choices become visible lives. There is another practice that quietly changes your inner atmosphere: learning to protect your attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Whatever repeatedly captures it slowly shapes you. If your attention is constantly consumed by outrage, comparison, fear, and endless noise, your emotional world cannot remain untouched. The mind absorbs what it repeatedly consumes. Just as the body becomes a reflection of what it is fed, your inner life becomes a reflection of what you repeatedly allow to enter it. Ask yourself honestly, what have I been feeding my mind lately? Does it leave me more peaceful, or more restless, more hopeful, or more afraid? Because every day you are teaching your nervous system what kind of world it lives in. And eventually, your nervous system believes you. This doesn't mean avoiding reality. It means choosing what deserves a permanent place inside your mind. Peace isn't created by the absence of problems. It is created by the wisdom to choose what receives your energy. Little by little, these ordinary decisions begin changing something invisible. Your breathing becomes calmer. Your reactions become slower. Your thoughts become clearer. Your presence becomes lighter. Not because life has stopped challenging you, but because, for the first time, you are no longer allowing every external event to decide your internal world. And that quiet shift changes far more than you can imagine. Because when your inner world becomes stable, your outer world finally has something new to grow from. Chapter 6: The Presence That Changes Everything Around You. There is something few people ever realize. Your life is not changed only by the actions you take. It is changed by the presence from which those actions come. Two people can say the exact same words: I believe in you. Yet one sentence feels empty. The other stays with you for years. Why? Because words carry the emotional state of the person speaking them. Presence always speaks louder than language. Think about someone who walks into a room without trying to be noticed. They don't dominate the conversation. They don't seek approval. They don't perform. Yet somehow, people naturally listen. Children feel safe around them. Animals become calm. Conversations become honest. Silence doesn't feel awkward. It feels peaceful. What creates that kind of presence? It isn't confidence in the way most people imagine. It isn't charisma. It isn't appearance. It certainly isn't perfection. It is inner coherence. When what you think, what you feel, what you believe, and how you live begin moving in the same direction, something extraordinary happens. People stop feeling the conflict inside you because there is less conflict to feel. Most human beings live divided. One part wants peace. Another part keeps feeding anxiety. One part wants meaningful relationships. Another part believes they don't deserve love. One part dreams of freedom. Another part clings to familiar suffering. Imagine trying to row a boat while each oar moves in opposite directions. You work harder, you become exhausted, yet you barely move. Not because you're weak, because your energy is divided. This is how many people live every day. They are constantly fighting themselves, trying to become someone new while refusing to release who they no longer are. But there comes a quiet moment when something begins to change. Not outside, inside. The inner arguments become quieter. The constant need to prove yourself begins to disappear. You stop chasing validation from people who cannot give you what you have never given yourself. Acceptance, respect, compassion. The more your relationship with yourself heals, the less desperate you become for the approval of everyone else. And something beautiful begins to happen. Your presence changes. You no longer walk into a room asking, "Will they accept me?" Instead, you quietly ask, "How can I bring peace into this moment?" That single shift changes everything, because fear always asks, "What can I get?" Presence asks, "What can I give?" Fear contracts. Presence expands. Fear protects. Presence connects. And people feel the difference. Not consciously, but deeply. Have you ever noticed that some conversations leave you energized, while others leave you completely drained? The topics may have been similar. The people may have used the same words, yet the experience felt completely different. Because emotional states are contagious. Calm inspires calm. Hope awakens hope. Gratitude softens hearts. Just as anxiety spreads silently through a room, peace does too. This is why the greatest gift you can offer the people you love isn't always advice. Sometimes it is your own stability, your own clarity, your own ability to remain grounded when life becomes uncertain. People often believe they change the world through dramatic actions. History tells a different story. The people who transformed lives most deeply were often those whose presence made others believe change was possible, not because they had all the answers, but because they embodied the possibility others had forgotten. Imagine becoming that kind of person, not someone who inspires fear, not someone who seeks admiration, but someone whose quiet presence reminds people that peace still exists, that hope is still possible, that healing is not a fantasy. Because when someone truly transforms, they stop trying to convince others. Their life becomes the evidence. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all. The energy you carry has never been only about you. Every room you enter changes slightly because you entered it. Every conversation is touched by the emotional atmosphere you bring. Every child, every friend, every stranger leaves with something of what you carried into that moment. So ask yourself, before you begin another ordinary day, What am I leaving behind wherever I go? Because whether you realize it or not, your presence is always teaching the world something. Make sure it teaches hope. #final chapter. The life that begins within. Perhaps, after everything you've heard, you expected one final secret, one technique, one hidden principle that would change everything. But life rarely transforms through secrets. It transforms through remembering. Remembering what has always been true, that beneath every fear, there is still a whole human being